Hello. So, concluding this sort of trilogy of videos, I would say, I watched the Return of the King extended edition. I mentioned this at the end of the Two Towers one, but Zach and I decided to forego seeing the Return of the King extended edition in theaters simply because it was almost 5 hours long. And sitting in a theater for a continuous amount of time for that length of time just seemed really daunting. So we decided, hey, we'll watch it at home, watch it at the next apartment, we'll get dinner, and we'll take breaks. And it was definitely like looking back, that's probably how we should have done the first two. But you know, hindsight's 2020. Anyway, so very quickly, I want to talk about my thoughts on Return to King. I don't have many watching the extended edition for the first time. I don't have many new thoughts. I would say there's it's still, in my opinion, the best of the trilogy and the best Tolkien adaptation ever made. I think it's you know it's like the perfect conclusion to the story. Zach and I, wait 1 second. Anyway, Zach and I had Zach came up with this kind of funny observation. All endings in fiction are either Gurren Lagann or Evangelion. Um, and Lord of the Rings is definitely has like a quintessential knife Gurren Lagann ending. Even though it came way before, which Frodo, having no more purpose left really in Middle Earth and not able to really function, in normal society again after what he's been through, decides to, join the elven leadership, and Gandalf and Bilbo and fucking off to the Grey Havens, which is essentially the afterlife continent for immortals, I believe. I don't know. So that's another interesting thing. I don't know pretty much anything about Tolkien lore. And it's weird watching a series of this nature and not knowing about the lore, and the history, because for example, A Song of Ice and Fire, I, not to sound like an asshole, I consider myself an expert on the A Song of Ice and Fire history and lore. And even there's stuff I don't fully comprehend or understand in that lore too. And I know just about everything about every area of that world, every facet of his era and facet of history in that world. It's something I've kind of independently studied since for 10 years, so I'm so seeped in that world that every little reference of dialogue or to something in history or anything, unless it's something new that hasn't been explored yet, I know what they're talking about. I understand that. And it's very interesting to watch a fantasy series. I don't think it's as big scale. But a fantasy series of that nature and not know what the hell a lot of the things they're talking about is. So it's a very interesting experience, and I think these movies would mean a whole lot more to me than they do if I did have that knowledge. If I had spent 10 years diving into Tolkien history and lore, reading all the books and expanded materials, and really coming to understand the world deeply, I feel like it would be a much different experience watching these movies and understanding lore pieces that people are talking about. And part of me wants to do that. Part of me wants to start the dive and tackle reading the books and the similar and diving into the Silmarillion and things like that. But I'm do I really love Lord of the Rings enough to dive into that? And I think the answer is probably no. I don't get me wrong, I love this trilogy. I think it's an incredible story, and I think I would consider myself the Fellowship. I would sit I gave a 4 out of 5, but Two Towers of Return, I gave both 5 out of 5s. They're masterpieces, but there's just not that extra level of something that makes it a series like One Piece or A Song of Ice and Fire, for example, that I absolutely cherish and consumes my mind almost all day, every day. Those series I think about constantly. They're always running in my brain. Lord of the Rings just doesn't hold that space, and it's kind of this I don't know, word is paradox almost, if you will, where I'm oh, do I need to do the deep dive to fall in love with it, or is the deep dive a consequence of already being in love with it? You know, so it's I'm kind of in the middle. Maybe one day I will do this deep lore dive and like become 10 times more invested in Tolkien than I already am, but I kind of don't have like a lot of space left in my head. You know, I would say like I'm doing that dive for Doctor Who right now. Doctor Who's always been one of my favorite series. It's means so much to me. And like just now am I diving into Classic Who and Big Finish, which are two huge elements of Doctor Who continuity and lore, you know, and like so I'm doing that now and I'm doing the work for that, but I've already done that for A Song of Ice and Fire at One Piece, you know, so it's like how much really room does like, you know, does my brain have for another franchise like that? And maybe I'll change my mind. Maybe I'll do that. I actually started. I've made a few attempts to read The Fellowship of the Ring, and it's rough. It is rough. A lot of people have discussed this, and I would say it's not a terrible book, but it is definitely. It's a good book, but it's definitely a product of its time where it indulges in these like monologues that aren't necessary to the narrative and indulges in these like almost filler arc like side quests, and it's really a slog to get through in that sense, like the core of the incredible narrative. And I think like that's what I mean, like Peter Jackson did an incredible job of like cutting what he could cut and changing what he could change without losing the core essence of the narrative and capturing that flawlessly, which he did. So I think he did an incredible job with that. He didn't really lose what the story is about, while still making extensive cuts. Like even the extended cuts that we watched, like he cut and changed so much still. Like there's so much from Fellowship that is not in the extended cut, and I think that's like very, it's a good thing. A lot of people are like, no Tom Bombadil, no Barrow Kings, and it's like really, you really wanted that stuff? It's just filler. It's just filler. Anyway. Yeah, where was I? Yeah, so like I really admire Peter. I think that's kind of what like a huge part of what makes the Hobbit trilogy fail. I love the first Hobbit movie. I think it is really good. The second and third are. The second is not bad. It's just they're not good. It's just there's nothing memorable there. But the third is actively horrible. And I think like Peter Jackson almost did the opposite, where with Lord of the Rings he manages to successfully make extensive cuts that like still manage to maintain the essence of the story. And with The Hobbit, he makes extensive additions that accidentally make him lose the essence of the story. So it's like literally the inverse process there, and I think that's why that trilogy doesn't really work. But yeah, so like something that comes to mind that Zach noticed like while watching is the world feels really small in these movies, despite this epic, expansive journey that they're going on. Like, I am not familiar, like, this goes back to my lore, like, I'm not familiar with the Tolkien map, like, world map. Like, it's not something I have ingrained in my head, like the A Song of Ice and Fire map, which is, like, like, I could look at a blank map and name, like, where everything is. So, like, the world does feel very small. There's pretty much, like, just a few locations that we visited in these movies. There's sub-locations, of course, like the abundance of sub-locations, but it's like, we got the Shire, we got Rivendell, we got the Misty Mountains, we got Lothlorien, we got, Isengard, we got Rohan, Gondor, and Mordor, and that's it. And it's like, there's points in the movies where like characters are bouncing back and forth between Rohan and Gondor, and it's like, oh, it's a 3 days ride, and it's like that makes the world feel so small. Like a 3 days ride is like I don't know. Like I don't know, I don't want to accidentally make like a dumb comparison and try them, but like it just makes the world feel so small. And there's a lot of shots like since the tail end of the first movie, it seemed like Mordor was like equidistant away. Like it never got like closer or further until like the very end of the third movie. So it was like there's one part of this movie that like expands the scale when they light the beacon in Gondor and all these people are stationed around the world are lighting the beacons back and it's like um it makes it feel a lot bigger because it's like all these like places in like where you can't see these locations from the other like in like and so I thought that scene was really cool. It doesn't really have much consequence because in the final war the only players really are Rohan Gondor and the ghosts that Aragorn gets. Another lore thing that must have been like amazing for lore nerds that I just don't really know, but yeah, like so it's weird how small the world feels, and then like yeah, I got the end of that point there. But I think if I'm correct, that the Hobbit and Lord of the Rings are like taking place in a very small sliver of the world map, um, which is cool. But it's like it's for example how like a lot of A Song of Ice and Fire takes place in Westeros, which is this massive continent with these different like climates and cultures. But like outside of Westeros is a small continent compared to Essos, which is this huge, massive landmass that like contains so many different cultures and societies and worlds. That's like and so much mystery and intrigue at the further east you get from where Westeros is positioned, and it's like you know it creates this whole expansive sense of wonder and lore. And I feel like I don't know, like the Lord of the Rings feels really small compared to that, which is surprising, very surprising. And I feel like if I were to dive into that lore and like the more like understand the full scale of the nature of the world map, it would feel like a lot different of a story. But yeah, I would say my overall thoughts is like I still love like these movies. I think they're absolute masterpieces. Watching these again really helped me to see where The Hobbit had its failures, and to understand that trilogy a little better. I still think a lot of the characters are dry. Um, I think like looking back, like for example, like Boromir and Faramir. Well, Boromir is pretty interesting, but like Faramir, like is like, and like the Steward of Gondor and like these people, they're like characters in the sense that they have one trait and that's the only trait they express, you know. And Legolas has no character, even though he was like my favorite as a child. And then I look back at like Legolas has no personality, no character. And I think that's like an elvish thing, but still, Arwen is really like she does like an incredible feat of action in like the first movie, and it shows like okay, maybe she has like this cool like warrior side, and then she like never taps into that again. It has no personality the rest of the series. So there's like definitely real issues, but I feel like these are more Tolkien issues than Peter Jackson issues, I would say. I would say like like Gandalf is like super cool. Aragorn, I would say like the best character is probably Sam. I think he is has the best development and overall fleshed out character. And yeah, like I think the characters not being as strong as they are, and especially the villain being so incredibly one note and boring, um, makes this series not as like fall in lovable for me, I would say. Like, and also the fact that everyone in this world knows about every single like magical facet or lore thing, other than people like the Shire. It seems like um, you know, like normal soldier goes Nazgul, and then like the dragons fly in, or like with the Nazgul on top, or like they see the green light from Miss Morgul, and they're like, oh, we know what that is immediately. And it's like, these things like take me out of it a bit, because I'm like, you know what is so I keep referring to the Song of Ice and Fire, but like Song of Ice and Fire does this so well, where that like most people think they're living in like essentially our world. They think they're living in a world that doesn't have these like, they know dragons are a historical thing. That's like their only extent of like magical understanding. It's only like in the far-flung reaches of society with like certain like, you know, like mysterious figures or priests that know like the true mysteries of the world. And no, it's as if like Lord of the Rings was told, where like no one had any idea about Sauron or what they were doing, except for like people, extended people, and they're like using that knowledge to try to influence political situations subtly. Like but like most people are just like, you know, living in like a normal like political society. And I think that's like what makes A Song of Ice and Fire so fascinating and unique, and such a subversion of stories like Lord of the Rings, where everyone just happens to know about everything. And it's you know, I hope George R. Martin finishes those books. God damn it, I probably won't, but you know. Anyway, yeah. So I will, you know, as I go through the book series, if I make it through this time, I'll obviously be making videos about each of those under my under like book review series. But yeah, overall, like loved watching these movies again. I've been meaning to watch the extended editions for years and years, so it was great to take that dive in back into this series through that lens. Great to show Zach the series for the first time. Yeah, so if you haven't seen these movies, they're 1,000% worth it. They're so good. Like, yeah, that's I think about it. I think that about wraps up my thoughts. So yeah, thanks guys for watching, and see you guys in the next video.